What if the first shot in a war between the United States and China were not a cruise missile, but a water bottle? U.S. goods exported to China in 2024 were valued at around $143.5 billion. U.S. goods imported from China in 2024 totaled around $438.9 billion. And even though there are these on-again, off-again tariffs, at least as of Tuesday, May 20th, 2025, when this video is being recorded, there is still trade happening between our two countries. However, you'd never believe it seeing the headlines concerning the inevitable conflict between the United States and China, a lot of which are coming from me. Heck, I just got back from this two-day intelligence conference on the People's Liberation Army Navy at the Naval War College in Rhode Island. I even wrote a book called The Wind Machine, which is about an AI-driven war with China. It's actually pretty good. Gotten some good reviews. And while nothing is ever inevitable, wars especially, it does appear that Chinese President Xi Jinping wants to take Taiwan by 2027 or 2028 and do so by force. And the U.S., if it keeps its promises to Taiwan and the surrounding region, could see this turn into a real shooting war. How this war unfolds depends on a number of factors. However, there is one area of our world that may offer some indicators as to when China and the U.S. will likely pull the trigger, and that's economics. For decades now, China has touted a strong, growth-centric economy, growing at enormous rates when other advanced economies have contracted and fallen into the chaos of recession. Heavy American tariffs seen under President Trump's first and second terms in office have not gone unnoticed by the communist leadership in Beijing. During the first round of tariffs, reporters from large news agencies like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and even The Economist, they found Beijing was ill-prepared for a trade war with its largest partner, the United States. Now, fast forward a few years and plop in the second round of tariffs, which at one point were up to like 145%, China seemed a bit more prepared. And again, this is according to some of the large news outlets. However, is that necessarily the case? Are they actually prepared? I'd argue that China wasn't as prepared as many outlets claimed, and U.S. economic pressure could be the ultimate kinetic effector. If we're careful, it could actually hinder a Chinese military invasion of Taiwan. If wielded incorrectly, it could actually force China to make a miscalculation that could ultimately, definitely lead to an invasion of Taiwan. But hey, if you're worried about tariffs, I can't help you there. But if you're worried about your personal information appearing online, well, that's why you need to use Aura. I probably got one of the best scam emails ever. This is totally 100% real. This actually happened to me. And it's why the average person needs something like today's sponsor, Aura All-in-One Digital Security. Look at this. It looks like a bill from USAA, but the account information isn't correct, and there's no such thing as a USAA Amex. If I had tried to log into that fake website, well, bad guys could now have my password. Look, if you've ever wondered how scammers get your phone number and email in the first place, it's because of data brokers. Scammers literally just buy the data. These data brokers are legally required to remove your data if you ask, but they don't make it easy. That's why I encourage you to use Aura. Aura does the hard work for you. You may already have antivirus. Cool. That doesn't stop your personal information from getting sold. With Aura, you get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web, as well as real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, plus 24/7 US-based support, secure VPN, password manager, and more. If anything does happen, Aura includes $5 million in identity theft insurance protection. I was one click away from losing my banking password. So go to aura.com/Ryan. Try Aura for free for 14 days. For about 2 weeks, you'll discover where your data is being exposed and sold, and start getting your name and email off of those data broker sites without lifting a finger. All right, start off here. If you like content such as this, consider supporting me over on Substack, ryanpet.substack.com. Over on my Substack, I offer this content ad-free, along with slide decks and resources. I share my videos for like $5 a month. It's dirt cheap considering what you get for it. Now, the next big war with China is on the horizon. And while I've said that the war with China, at least the shooting war, hasn't started yet, the softer elements, the gray zone of this conflict has already begun. The Chinese Communist Party, which rules over mainland China with an iron grip, has plans for invading Taiwan and pulling it into the party's orbit. With Taiwan in China's grip, a nearly century-long effort at reunifying China will come to fruition. China has made serious political and economic moves to ready its invasion of Taiwan. When I explored the People's Liberation Army, you might remember my discussion on China studying American wars in the Middle East. In particular, they studied the U.S.'s invasion of Iraq. The American invasion of Iraq helped China take on new modernization efforts with vigor. It also helped them understand how the international arena responds to such an operation, further assisting China's communist leadership in understanding what they need to do to isolate Taiwan and protect China. If you've been living under a rock for the last few months, you may be unaware that the current conflict taking place between China and the United States is largely economic in nature. The United States and China have traded barbs and higher tariffs for a few months now, which has culminated in closed-doors talks in Geneva between high-ranking U.S. and Chinese officials. These high-level talks in Geneva appear to have simmered tensions between the U.S. and China for now. What we need to be wary of here is how economics can lead to real shooting and serious and deadly miscalculations. The tariffs of the 1920s and 1930s, along with rampant isolationism in the United States, brought on a series of regional and global conflicts that culminated in what we call World War II. The tariffs under Trump far exceeded those leading up to World War II, so it kind of begs the question, could this lead China into a shooting war? The answer is complicated. You know, the world we live in now is a different creature than the one where World War II took place. We live in a highly connected, globalized, technology-driven world. We live in a world of cities that depend on technology and easily accessible food and water supplies and complicated infrastructure. Our world is smaller and more fragile than ever before. At least during World War II, the vast majority of the world's population lived on farms, subsisting off what the soil could kind of provide. But while World War II was kind of a humbler way of life, it was also hardier in the sense that our entire way of life was kind of easier to rebuild if wars took off. I mean, in a lot of ways, if you read 1 second after, you can see how rural communities might certainly fare better than urban ones if the light suddenly went out. But they wouldn't fare much better. A conflict between China and the United States could destroy the world as we know it, even in a limited scope. And it's not necessarily nuclear fire here, but we're talking about the simple, everyday things. I mean, the water bottle that I drink from in between cuts, made in China. But it's more than that. A war between China and the U.S. could end free and open navigable seas, which means countries like the U.S. and even smaller players would need to spend a good deal of money on navies to escort trade vessels. A war between China and the United States could mean an end to middle-class lifestyles, inexpensive electronics, and world stability. While I would caution any brazen attempts to force China's hand here, I think we need to consider something when it comes to fighting a belligerent China. We have the greatest argument and collection of tools at our disposal for making China play ball. It isn't cruise missiles or autonomous sea drones or anti-ballistic missile defense systems, it's economics. And economics, if wielded correctly, could bring the Chinese to the table, so to speak. In the U.S., there are probably enough alternatives for water bottles that if China stopped manufacturing water bottles, we would be okay. We would figure out alternatives. But in China, water bottles are wasted if nobody will buy them. And if your economy depends on exporting cheap crap in order to import food, well, America can survive without cheap crap. But try surviving without food. If we break down the numbers, China cannot survive without international trade, especially when it comes to foodstuffs and critical supplies. The communists in Beijing can't have their cake and eat it too. Well, the Communist Party will have cake. It's the regular citizens that'll suffer, right? Now, China can't expect to invade Taiwan and hope that their neighbors, who are arming themselves for the next big fight, are just going to stand by. So why don't we play the long game? Why don't we co-opt the Chinese into the international system a bit more, forcing their hand to meet their mouth here? Economics might be our greatest weapon against a China looking to exert its influence on the global stage. After all, money talks and money walks. Encouraging the Chinese to play the game and allow Taiwan to decide its own fate may seem a bit wonky considering what has been going on in the background. If we're honest, even an international military effort to keep Taiwan a free and independent country might be the equivalent of believing in Prince Charming saving the day in a Disney film. Sounds beautiful, seems like the right thing to do, but reality is a harsher mistress here. And if you don't believe me, consider what's happening in Ukraine. Prince Charming turned out to be a frog, right? And Ukraine kissed a lot of frogs. Taiwan's own porcupine defense strategy, along with international partnership and investment in China proper, might be a better path forward. The United States, which has been flirting with isolationism again, will need to accept the role that it has refused to do. It'll need to start working on bringing in folks together who can counter China economically and politically. We have done a decent job militarily, but that can't be the only part of this regional puzzle. The U.S. also needs to put up a stronger defense against China's ambitions in the region. American leadership on the global stage must come back. What's going on right now? That ain't it, bub. That ain't it. We're one of the few countries in the world that could pull this off. And our partners and adversaries alike know this. So we need to step up. The U.S. commands one of the largest consumer economies in the world. China comes nowhere near competing with us economically. For over a decade now, insiders and experts around the globe have pointed out that China fakes much of its economic growth in data. While it has seen some growth, it is nowhere near robust enough to weather long-term economic stresses. The greatest indicator of this appeared during the latest bout of tariffs between the United States and China. China buckled somewhat despite offering a hardline stance from the beginning. China cannot feed itself without international imports. This is the key to keeping China in the fold. International trade keeps the communist promise alive. China can feed themselves and their families. Chinese people can survive and thrive without access to the world markets, without freedom of navigation of the seas. China starves. Literally and metaphorically, China becomes a larger version of North Korea. In conjunction with regional partnerships and supporting a healthy Taiwanese border defense, the U.S. could keep the next war with China from becoming a reality. Strong, committed American leadership is key here. However, if the U.S. only uses economic sticks with a few carrots maybe, we could see the opposite in the region. And the U.S., it doesn't offer a lot of leadership here. We could still see China make some deadly calculations to push the U.S. out and exert their influences regionally. China could use deteriorating economic stability as a rallying point for a Taiwanese invasion. It could usher in a China that decides to make a calculated effort to push a wishy-washy superpower like the United States out of the region. We did not do any favors to ourselves with Europe. And while the U.S. efforts to bring back manufacturing are noble and, should be done, we need to have a talk, America, because we're not going to be producing low-end consumer goods in the U.S. We're not. Not for the prices Americans are going to pay. And for those of you who haven't read it, you might consider this little old tome called The Wealth of Nations, which inspired much of the U.S. economic system from the get-go. Adam Smith even recognized the value of competitive advantage, and he knew that all countries couldn't be islands unto themselves. Trade needed to exist. Trade is good, in fact. I don't think this current administration, which has been wildly in favor of tariffs, is looking to make the U.S. the only manufacturing game in town here. I think the administration sees a national weakness, which is the inability to produce much-needed critical supplies, and it wants to remedy that. Dude, that makes sense. I got you. However, we need to understand the limits of returning manufacturing to the U.S. We also need to realize that our increasingly aging population and American unwillingness to take these manufacturing jobs is going to present some serious problems. We need to lead from the front here. We also need to compromise too. We have to work with our partners and allies and friends to solve the Chinese problem before it becomes a devastating shooting war. We need to lead from the front by supporting the very system that we created. Doing this will also call China in on its bad behavior. They've touted internationally their willingness to keep existing agreements and maintain economic stability. So let's kind of keep them at their word here. Well, yes, some self-sufficiency is good, especially in critical areas such as agricultural fertilizers, computer chips, and, warships. These are areas that we can work with our partners and allies on so we're not caught with our pants down. We can also use targeted legislation and national investments to keep key industries safe from being eroded by foreign competition. We can use a combination of carrots and sticks to keep China in the fold. We need to allow Taiwan to lead when it comes to their own sovereignty. We need to push for regional cooperation in the face of mounting Chinese aggression. We can keep the conversations productive here, and we can keep people from turning the Indo-Pacific region into a shooting gallery. Economics plays a huge role in keeping this within reach. American leadership is also required. We built the system that allowed China to become the country it is now. We need to understand that we can steer this ship toward calmer waters. It'll take some effort. It'll take some compromises with allies. It'll take reaching out to allies and not treating them like children, but it'll be worth it. You know, as of April 2025, Karen Sutter of the Congressional Research Service noted, China is a key export market for U.S. aircraft, agriculture, semiconductor equipment, chips, gas turbines, medical devices, and a top source of U.S. consumer goods intermediates like auto parts, active pharmaceutical ingredients. However, in the same report, Sutter found that American companies receive little reciprocal access to Chinese markets. Within the recent negotiations in Geneva, there is some hope that maybe U.S. firms can one day enjoy reciprocal benefits within the Chinese market. By making trade more reciprocal and pulling China deeper into the global economy, we could avert a disastrous Taiwanese invasion by China. A more ingrained China, a China kind of kept in the fold, could keep regional stability a reality in the Indo-Pacific region. It could also disincentivize a Chinese dream of taking Taiwan. Hey, if you like content like this, support me over on Substack, ryanbeth.substack.com. I offer content like this ad-free along with slide decks. I do it for $5 a month. It's dirt cheap. Anyone can afford it. You can also grab one of my t-shirts like the Captain Moroni Squadron shirt, which is part of my other new book called The Last Republic. This is about a Mormon country that's in the middle of America that comes into eventual conflict with the U.S. government. You can get the t-shirt at bunkerbranding.com, and signed copies of the book should be at bunkerbranding.com as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Wow, this girl from Watertown sure is cool. Hey kid, what's going on? Think tank! You know, a girl from Watertown is kind of like riding a moped. It's lots of fun till your friends see you on one. What's really cool is a t-shirt or hoodie from Bunker Branding. Wow! Intel Life! Control-C, Control-V! That's exactly what we do! And Bunker Branding has all sorts of cool gear. Intel Life, Air Assault, Live, Laugh, Launch for Destroyer, Trident, HIMARS, and Patriot. Think outside the bomb. Drone Suite Drone, Department of the Boat People, landmines, and even the tow missile. It would behoove you to grab one today. Girls from Watertown aren't cool, so wear your Bunker Branding gear. Now I know. And knowing's half the battle. Hey babe, you wanna dance? Bunker Branding!